The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing Icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business, from $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters in Real Estate Marketing, Arter SEO.
Welcome back to the Icons of Real Estate podcast. I am joined today. I'm thrilled to have a very special guest with me on the show, a true expert in real estate, sold over $2 billion worth of real estate so far. He's an industry professional with a wealth of knowledge and experience. Brent Sprenkle has been a driving force in the real estate world for over 2 decades, working with investors, developers, and brokers to not only navigate the complexities of the market, but also be a top producing broker in his own right. Okay. Brent has a unique perspective on strategies. These have led him to success, and he's here to share his insights on what he has learned so far today. So get ready for an enlightening conversation and episode as we dive into the world of real estate with Brent Sprenkle. Brent, thank you so much for being on the podcast. How's everything going?
Things are great. Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here today.
Good stuff. How'd you like the intro? Because I'm sure you've done a few podcasts in the past. How does that kind of
Yeah,
rank in your in your process in terms of
that was great. That was perfect. I love that.
perfect, great stuff. Well, Brent, let's get straight into it. You've obviously been around the block in terms of real estate, and you've been a top earning producer for the best part of 20 years now. I would like to kind of peel the onion a little bit back and kind of start at the when in your early life, and when you first got into real estate. Why did you decide to get into real estate itself? And how was that first couple years of you kind of breaking into the industry?
Well, out of college, I was an engineer. I worked for a company called Hughes. We built DirecTV satellites, and I spent really 3 years working on satellites. Eventually, I lost my job. I got laid off, and a friend of mine had been investing in apartment buildings, and I was really fascinated with what he was doing, and he was living a great life, not really having to go to work every day, and I wanted to do what he was doing.
Yeah.
But the issue was I didn't have any money to be an investor. And he said the best way for you to get into business is to go become a broker. And you'll learn the ins and outs of the business. You'll figure out how people make money, and you'll make money, which you can use to invest. And there's no barrier to entry. You just need to get a real estate license, have a car, have a computer, have a phone, and you can go out and make deals happen. So got myself a broker's job, which are easy to come by. No salary. Here's your desk. Here's the phone. Call people. And that was really it. The first 2 years, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. They were hell. It was like 12-hour, 14-hour days,
Wow.
lots of rejection, not a lot of peer support because everybody was going through the same thing. Um, I was flat broke. There was a time where I couldn't even pay the parking meter at a parking structure in Santa Monica to get my car out. It was really embarrassing. So there were some really, really, really rough times. And eventually, after about a year and a half, he started to make money. He saw there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and things started to get momentum. And here I am today.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'd like to touch on that because you mentioned a few things here. The beauty of consistency, right? A lot of people these days, they get into new markets and they see the glitz, the glamour, that aspect of it, because you can make a lot of money in real estate, no doubt. I've heard somewhere, that real estate has made more millionaires than any other industry, right? But that process of getting starting to see the domino effect of your efforts took nearly a year and a half. I mean, what did you kind of have to tell yourself in that year and a half after constant rejection and, almost like a roller coaster ride, really, of your emotions? What kind of allowed you to kind of keep on going day by day instead of just packing it in and giving it up? What was that?
Oh, it was so difficult because you had so much negativity. I mean, the girl I was dating at the time was like, "You're never going to make money. You're never going to be successful in this." I mean, and I ended that relationship because I needed some positivity in it. Everyone surrounding me they were like cautiously optimistic. They were patting me on the back saying, "You can do it." But I think that they didn't believe in me either, but they were trying to be optimistic. Um, as you're looking at bills coming to mail and with no way to pay them, things also become tough. But I just set out, I said, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this until I can't do it anymore, till I get kicked out of my apartment, till I don't have a place to live. My car broke down. I couldn't fix it. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was truly desperate times, but I just kept grinding. I just kept getting closer. I starting to develop relationships with some property owners I knew would eventually give me some business. I started feeling more confident in myself, my knowledge, and my abilities to work with people.
Yeah,
And eventually stuff started to hit. I started getting more appointments for to be brought to the table for a broker opinion of values to win business, to win listing assignments. And eventually I started to get listings and then the deals started going in escrow and I knew paychecks were coming.
yeah,
It just took really a year and a half to get any momentum. And I just had to keep telling myself, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And I just became extremely regimented. I had amazing consistency. I was in the office every day by 6:30. I was on the phones every day by 9. I set up meetings every day. I set up listing appointments every day. I stayed in the office till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I even worked Saturdays, sometimes on Sundays. I was just grinding because I knew if it was a simple equation. If I made enough calls, if I made enough appointments, provided I knew what I was talking about, I would eventually win business.
yeah, yeah,
It just took time. I knew it was a simple formula. I have a degree in engineering, and I just said, this is not that difficult.
yeah,
Sure, there's people that have brighter personalities. There's people that are more engaging or whatever, they're more charming. But I knew that if I'm going to be a business person, as long as I'm professional, knowledgeable, and hardworking, someone's going to give me some business.
yeah,
And once you start to get business and other people see, hey, this guy's got deals going on, this guy knows what he's doing, maybe we should talk to him about selling our building.
yeah,
So that is what it took.
yeah.
It just took a lot of time and a lot of
Constant,
consistency.
yeah, consistency and just doing the right thing every day, which can be daunting for a lot of people. But
Yes.
eventually you found a lot of success in, the multifamily asset, sector of real estate, right? What just for people listening in, Brent, what are multifamily assets and why are they such a good form of investment as opposed to other forms of real estate?
Well, multifamily investment is simply an apartment building. It could be a duplex, it could be 20 units, it could be 200 units. It's anything that's really two or more units. Why people like to invest in them, people understand them. Just about everyone at one point in their life has lived in an apartment building or has friends living in an apartment building. People are familiar with the asset.
Yeah,
The other thing, they're easy to finance, and they're easy to manage, and they're easy to lease. Commercial properties, office buildings, retail properties, very difficult to lease. Apartment buildings, you put a for rent sign up. As long as the rent you're asking is reasonable, someone's going to call and want to rent the place.
yeah,
So it's a lot easier for people to digest, for them to manage, for them to understand. And there's a lot of them out there, and a lot of times they're very reasonably priced. But there's headaches involved with them. Tenants are difficult, the costs are difficult, insurance prices have been skyrocketing. Obviously, interest rates are twice what they were 2.5 years ago. So there are challenges, there are things to consider. But if you're going to make an investment, apartment buildings are arguably the easiest to purchase as your first investment property.
mm,
And a lot of people kind of quote unquote graduate from small apartment buildings into larger apartment buildings and then get out of them and go buy industrial or shopping centers or something like that. So it just really depends on what path you want to go.
yeah.
But apartment buildings oftentimes are the first uh, commercial real estate investment that people make.
Yeah, it seems like a very good entry level introduction into the commercial real estate side of things. I guess from your wealth of knowledge, I mean, you've been in the game for now, dominating for the last 2 decades, which I can only imagine, from the year and a half that you had of banging your head against the table to now really seeing the fruits of your labor. It's probably extremely night and day. Um, I guess what's going on in the apartment building market nationally compared to the local market of Los Angeles, would you say, when you compare the two?
Well, transactions are they're down 80 to 90% depending on what data source you're looking at. And that's really a function of interest rates.
Right.
When interest rates double, something's got to give. I mean, the Fed's intentionally trying to slow the economy down, and it works. I mean, our business, the second they even discuss raising rates, our business dries up because the deals don't make sense. If you're looking at buying something that's a 5 cap and the debt's 4%, you can make that work and get leverage. If the cap rate is still 5% and the interest rate goes from 4% to 6, all of a sudden you have negative leverage and the deal doesn't make any cash flow. It just doesn't work. And something's got to give. Either interest rates go down or the price goes down. And right now it's just been prices have dropped, 20 to 40% depending on the asset and the location, et cetera. Your question, I think, there was a few different questions. One was going on nationally.
Yeah.
As mentioned, transactions are down drastically. What's going on locally? California, we like this rest of the nation, we have an election coming up, but we have something very specific here. There's something on the ballot called the Justice for Renters Act. And if that was to pass, the cities would be able to basically do whatever they wanted with rent control laws. So there's a lot of kind of fear and concern that some of the cities might go very draconian with rent control laws. And a lot of people are very hesitant to make any investments right now because they're concerned with that. I don't feel it's going to pass because there's been similar ballot measures over the last 4 years that didn't pass. So I'm optimistic that it does not pass and that things will be fine. But there's always hesitation in investing any time before an election.
Yeah.
And this year, it's not just the presidential and local elections, but we also have this rent control measure. So that's made things in California, especially in Los Angeles, a little bit more challenging because people are very concerned about politics, legislative risk in Los Angeles. Should that ballot measure pass, the city of Los Angeles could do pretty much whatever they wanted to do, and it could really make it
Yeah.
impossible to make a living off your apartment buildings. But in general, there's still demand. Rents are high. They have softened a little bit. Vacancies are extremely low. It's still an amazing time to be an investor. And the biggest thing is prices have dropped. Buildings that used to be 200,000 a unit are now 120,000 a unit. I mean, prices are down like 40%.
Yeah.
So that's really fantastic. And interest rates are starting to come down. We're starting to see 5% now where they used to be 6%. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, things are going in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that's good.
You mentioned interest rates, and you mentioned something quite key there was like the political landscape across like the time of investing. I understand, some things are just out of our control. In terms of interest rates, although you can't really control how they would, fluctuate from year on and year out. But do you see like a trend across interest rates over the last 5 years, and how do you kind of forecast the next 5 years would be in terms of interest rates? Would it make it favorable to investors, or a little bit more, tiptoeing around the subject in terms of investing in that regard?
It's the elephant in the room in every conversation, interest
Yeah,
rates. I mean,
yeah.
during COVID, they dropped them. They were like in the threes. And then, 2 years ago, they popped up to 7%. And
Wow.
then they kind of lowered and they were like in a mid to low sixes. And now we're starting to see some in a, 5.75, 5.8, 5.9. I mean, we're starting to see some much more interest in interest rates. And the cap rates, they also changed. Everything was a 4 cap, and then it went to a 5 cap. And now we're starting to see some deals that are 5.5, 6% cap rates, good buildings in good areas. So if you can buy a 6% cap rate apartment building and you could put debt on it in the 5.75, 5.5% range, that's a good equation for cash flow. And if deals are cash flowing again, people are going to start buying them. The issue previously was, why would you invest in a commercial real estate in an apartment building? We can just go buy, a CD or a treasury, 5% or whatever. It's just like it was easy. And apartments weren't cash flowing. But because prices have dropped, cap rates are up, the deals all of a sudden are starting to make a lot more sense. So there's a lot more interest now in buying than there was even 2 months ago because of what's happened with pricing and interest rates. We're
Wow.
finally getting to a level of equilibrium where deals are starting to become very interesting.
And do you see that equilibrium kind of spreading out over the next couple months, or at least in the next year or two?
Um, Prices are probably leveled out. I mean, prices were here and they dropped to like I said, what was 200,000 unit is now 120 to 140.
Yeah.
I don't suspect it goes to 100. I think it's probably flat because interest rates are starting to go down, and we're starting to see buyers re-enter the marketplace. Deals that we've had in the market for 3, 4 months where there was no offers, all of a sudden we have offers. So that's really encouraging. Where things go, it's hard to say, but the election is going to slow things down just because it inherently always does. Every time we get to an election year, September, October, before the election are usually very quiet. So I expect August to be a pretty good month for transactions, what we're in right now. September, October will be much slower because people just don't want to catch that falling knife, which would be
Yeah.
buying something right before an election and then being like, oh, now I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. But I think if the election goes well and we don't have chaos and interest rates continue trending down, we're going to see values start to appreciate at the beginning of next year. That's my opinion.
Amazing. Amazing. Great stuff. So, I mean, like they say, I mean, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today, right? So,
That's a
um,
great
yeah,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I guess like, having kind of considered all of that on the table in terms of um, whether it's good to do multifamily, nationally or in locally in Los Angeles. Of course, there's different political landscapes and whatnot that you kind of have to always kind of you know work with because things are like that they're out of your control. I guess right now, where do you think people should be looking to invest now if they're interested in multifamily? You know, if
I think people should look in areas where they feel there's going to be rent growth, where they feel there's going to be population growth, but also places have been beaten up on value. I mean, if you look, like I mentioned, in Los Angeles, prices went from 200,000 unit down to 120 on a lot of assets. I mean, that's a great sign because you could go buy a building now at 120 a unit, and it's most likely going to go back to 200 in the next couple of years. So you're going to feel really good if that happens. Now, our interest rate is going to go back down to 3%. No, I don't see it happening. But if we get steady rent increases and interest rates stay where they are or go lower by a bit, you could see it go from 120 a unit to 130 to 140. I mean, you could see really great natural appreciation, which would be really fabulous.
yeah,
And as long as rents are increasing and you're increasing the net income, that's really positive. Now, there's some things that need to change. And property insurance has become a real issue. I mean, whether sometimes you can't even get insurance, um, and when you can get it, it's like 5 to 10 times the price that it used to be. I mean, premiums have gone out of control. So that's a real challenge. California, Florida, Texas. I mean, all these areas that have tenant issues with attorneys, habitability lawsuits, and then you've got storms, hurricanes, massive rainstorms. Insurance companies just can't handle this, and the losses have been astronomical, and they're just pulling out of a lot of markets. So I think it's just important when you're investing to make sure you can get an insurance policy that's halfway reasonable. Everyone's so concerned about interest rates, but that's just part of the equation. The insurance thing is a real problem. But as far as where to invest, I don't think there's a specific silver bullet on a location, just an area that you feel comfortable with, that you understand where you're going to find tenants, that rents are going to keep going up or at least stay flat. Population is going to grow to some areas where the population is declining. You got to stay away from those areas because I just don't know who you rent to, and you're going to have a lot of vacancies. It's going to be a challenge.
yeah.
They can't give those properties away, in my opinion. But things will make sense if you really look and dig deep and just start thinking logically.
Yeah, um, that makes a lot of sense. So, Brent, I mean, the thing that's kind of really struck me with you is, you're operating in the market of Los Angeles, which notoriously has been known to be an extremely competitive local market to really, get a foot in. You mentioned earlier in the podcast where you really had to grind your teeth to smithereens pretty much for a year and a half before you could start seeing some momentum. I guess what advice do you have for new brokers or new realtors getting into the competitive markets in general and really, trying to find the, way into a situation where they can start getting deals consistently? What do you feel like? What successful traits do you feel like they need to have in order to break through in a really competitive market? Would you say?
So I have junior agents on my team here, and one of the advantages they have is we have inventory, we have product, in the form of listings. So I put all my junior brokers' names on all my listings, so it's theoretically their listing. And when they're calling clients, they can very proudly and accurately and honestly tell them, "This is my listing. I have a listing. It's on a street that you own a building on. Are you interested in buying it?" And then they come across as an experienced, knowledgeable broker. Whereas when you get a call from some random broker at a random company and he has no listings, he has nothing to offer, you're probably not going to want to work with this person.
Yeah.
So it's important to join a team that's established, that has product, that's reputable, where people will want to have a conversation with you. Um, that is a big deal, and that is what's enabled my junior agents to gain traction, to gain momentum, to build a client list, because they're already coming in with something with their name on it, some listings, so it makes them the expert immediately.
It seems like they're already coming in with it, even though they don't, but it seems like they do have a little bit of skin in the game because you're basically putting like a trustworthy listing behind someone who's really new in the game and basically letting them win in that front. It always comes down to, of course, if you've got which one would a buyer rather choose from? Buy from someone that's got an experience, business name behind them, that's got listings, or someone that doesn't, right? So I guess having those successful, positive experiences and that that professional outlook behind you really kind of sets you apart, I guess. Um, I
Yeah.
guess I guess on the flip side, then, what do you feel like new brokers and new realtors should avoid when it comes to putting their foot into the industry? And like, what habits should they avoid? And
Oh, that's easy. Just cheesy sales pitches.
yeah,
I mean, it's been into forever. I mean, I own properties and I get calls from brokers. "Hi, a client of mine wants to buy your apartment building. What will you take for it?" It's like, you
yeah,
don't have a client and I'm not selling my building. Like, leave me alone. And you hang up and they put you on like the do not call list, and like then you can never reach them again. I mean, your goal is to build a relationship with somebody, call them, offer them something of value. "Hello, property owner. My name is so and so. I have 5 apartment listings. Are you looking to buy right now? How can I help you grow your business?"
yeah,
People will appreciate you, even if they say, "I'm not interested in doing anything right now. I do appreciate your call." You have to develop a relationship with people. If you call them trying to take something away, I have a client that wants to steal your property. They're not going to appreciate that.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
not going to want to talk to you again. They're never going to take your call again, most likely. So it's just not worth trying to do something that comes across as cheap and sleazy and not helpful to property owners if you're trying to gain them as a client, which is everyone's goal.
yeah, 100%. This is the thing in sales. I mean, I worked in sales for a number of years, and there's a thing called commission breath, right? You don't want to sound like you want the deal so badly that you're willing to do it wherever it takes. And the prospect, unfortunately, and not unfortunately, but it's just the way that we live. Like these days, prospects are a lot more educated than they were, say, in the 50s and 60s, right? Like you can't put the wool over someone's eyes, and especially if they have the power to hang up the phone, it's probably best not to do that, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it takes a long time to establish a relationship with somebody, and it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, it takes 5 to 10 times speaking with somebody on the phone for them to really even remember who you are.
Yeah,
And there's so many people out there that what are you going to do to distinguish yourself from the others? I mean, I get calls on my buildings all day long, and when the call ends, I don't remember who the person was that called me.
yeah,
And they called me 30 seconds before. I heard their name and went in one ear out the other.
yeah,
So it's like you've got to do something to get your name in front of people to have them remember you. I think having an unusual last name has been helpful for me. If
yeah,
your name was something like John Smith or something very generic,
yeah,
you might need to come up with some good way for people to remember you, um, with something that's unique. A lot of people do emails, they do mailers like postcards. you've got to get your name in front of people, and you have to do something for them to remember you, to stand out from the crowd, because there is massive saturation of real estate agents all trying to do the same thing,
Yeah,
get apartment listings. So it's important to find something to make yourself different and
100%.
add value to a client.
100%. Well, Brent, I mean, I guess like from your point of view, I guess, 2024 is almost up. What do you feel like your goals are for the rest of the year?
I'd love to get all my listings sold. Is that realistic? Probably not. But if I
Yeah,
can get some of them, most of them, two-thirds of them sold, that'd be fabulous. So what are my goals? Just to try to get some of these things across the finish line.
yeah,
Um, that's it's as simple as that.
yeah. And how are you kind of planning on doing so? Because, as much as you're probably in a very competitive market as it is, and you are really well established, in your own right. But is there the plan? Does the plan of action kind of change quarter to quarter, or is it kind of let's hit the phones, let's see how things go? Is there like a direct plan that you have to actually achieve these goals in 2024, or
I Interest rates dropping has been really helpful
right?
because the increased activity is there. I mean, the amount of offers that have come in over the course of the last 2 weeks is very evident that something is happening. So I just think if we keep this momentum up, we're going to have excellent results for the rest of the year because we're finally seeing that buyers are coming back to the table because they see that the worst is behind us with interest rates and values dropping.
Yeah, cool. Cool. So, Brent, I've got one last question for you. It's a fun question. So at the Icons of Real Estate, we pride ourselves on being the number one, podcast network for real estate, and we're passionate about making podcasting more accessible, for everyone, really. So, let's say hypothetically, or wherever the case may be, if you did have your own podcast, what would you call it, and what would the theme be around it?
Well, my own podcast, it would have to be something catchy, something that seems exciting and fun, but yet involving apartment buildings because it's what I do. So, fun apartment investing,
Yeah.
something simple, catchy. I mean, why not? Why not take something that's kind of dull on the surface and
Yeah,
make it fun? So, fun apartment investing.
perfect.
That's it. The fun apartment investing podcast with Brent Sprenkle. There you go.
The name actually has a ring to it.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
so good stuff. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Icons of Real Estate podcast with Brent Sprinkle. I hope you've actually took something away. I definitely did. I mean, from someone who's had a fountain of knowledge for the last 2 decades, it'll be impossible for you guys not to actually take anything away from it. So, Brent, thank you so much for your time. Guys, we'll catch you guys in the next one. All right. Cheers.
Thank you.